In Chapter 7, we're looking at fractions that don't have the same denominator, like denominators. And the first step in adding or subtracting them is to find a common denominator. So that's what this lesson is about. Your learning intentions: I can find a common denominator for a group of fractions, and I can compare and order fractions. Jasmine and Tyler collect trading cards. Jasmine has collected 1/3 of a set. Tyler has collected 1/4 of a set. They want to know who has more cards, so they need to be able to compare the fractions. It's easier to compare fractions when the denominators are the same, so Jasmine and Tyler need to find a common denominator. Now what I want you to do is I want you to get a piece of paper. It doesn't really matter how big the piece of paper is. And we know that Jasmine has collected 1/3 of a set, so you're going to take that paper and you're going to fold it into 3 equal pieces and color one of those pieces, because she has 1/3 of a set, you're going to color one of those pieces red. Do that now. After you watch the video that is included here, I want you to write down what the relationship is between the denominators 3, 4, and the denominator 12. And then tell me, or write in your journal rather, what's one method for determining a common denominator? A common denominator is a common multiple of the denominators of a set of fractions. So, for example, a common denominator for 1/4 and 1/6 would be 12, because a common multiple of 4 and 6 is 12. 4 times 3 equals 12, 6 times 2 equals 12. Also remember that a factor times a factor equals a multiple. So in this type of equation, the factors are part of the expression and the multiple is part of the answer. We're going to compare 2/3 and 1/4. The first thing we need to do is figure out a common denominator. There's a couple of different ways that we can do this. One way is using the paper folding method that we did earlier, or we could use a diagram. So if we have a rectangle, we can divide this rectangle into 3 equal parts, and then that deals with the 2/3. For 1/2, going the other way, we want to divide it into 2 equal parts. So we can see that a common denominator for the denominators 3 and 2, a common multiple of 3 and 2, is 6. So we want now to turn both of these fractions into fractions over 6. Using our picture here, we can see 2/3. If we color that in, 2/3 is the same as 4/6, because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 of our rectangle colored in. For 1/2, if we color in 1/2, we can see that 1/2 is the same as 1, 2, 3, 6. So 2/3 is bigger than 1/2. Instead of using diagrams, we could also use common multiples. So we start with 3 and we look at the multiples of 3. 3 times 1 equals 3, 3 times 2 equals 6, 3 times 3 equals 9, 3 times 4 equals 12, and so on and so forth. Looking at the number 2, 2 times 1 equals 2, 2 times 2 equals 4, 2 times 3 equals 6, 2 times 4 equals 8, and so on and so forth. And we can see that 6 is a common multiple. So we know that 2/3 equals something over 6, and we know that 1/2 equals something over 6. Now, this is where we use our whatever you do to the top, you do to the bottom, or in this case, whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. 2 times something equals 6. Looking at our multiplication table, 2 times 3 equals 6. Whatever we do to the bottom, we do to the top. 1 times 3 equals 3. So 1/2 is equivalent to 3/6. 3 times 2 equals 6. Whatever we do to the bottom, we do to the top. 2 times 2 equals 4. So 2/3 is equivalent to 4/6, which again tells us that 2/3 is greater than 1/2. I want you to copy this down in your notebook. Make sure you note that you can do it through diagrams and models. The paper would have been the model. And you can do it through looking for multiples. Here are your key ideas for this lesson. To determine a common denominator, you can use paper folding, diagrams, or multiples. But the first two methods, paper folding and diagrams, really only work when you're comparing just two denominators. If you're comparing 3 or more, it's more complicated to use paper folding or diagrams. What you would want to do then is find a common denominator between two of the fractions. So for example, we'd look at 1/2 and 1/3. We'd divide it into 3 on one side, 2. That gives us 6. And then we would have to compare the fraction of 6 and 4. So we would divide it into 6 on one side. This is not very even, but you get the point. And then 4 on the other side. Now the problem, of course, with this leaves us with a common denominator of 24, which works, but it's not actually the lowest common denominator of 2, 3, or 4. If you look at multiples, which is the easiest method, you look at 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. 3 has 3, 6, 9, and 12. 4 has 4, 8, and 12. So our lowest common denominator is actually over 12 instead of over 24. This still works using the paper method. It's just a little bit longer. If you're comparing 3 or more fractions, therefore, finding a multiple that's common to all 3 of the denominators is easier. Finally, to write fractions with a common denominator, you need to determine equivalent fractions. So you're looking at what you're doing in the bottom to get to the common denominator, and you're doing that to the top. Whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. Please do your communicate the ideas questions now.